This is the We Witches 3 podcast, where you will hear the opinion of 3 seasoned witches who are tired of glossy, tunnel vision, love and light accolades about serious metaphysical topics. Your host, Maria Sewell and Heather Woodward, have been practicing witches and professional psychics for over 20 years. They not only have the experience, but they have the research to back it up. So get comfortable on your brooms, grab a snack, and get ready for a wild ride.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Divine Wild Woman podcast. This is Heather Woodward. If you haven't noticed, I've been on hiatus from this podcast. It's because I have a second podcast called Envious Alien at podcast.enviousalien.com. That's NVUSalien.com if you want to check out what I'm doing. One of the things that I've been working on, that's why I haven't done this podcast in a while, is I did a Slender Man's 6-episode series about the supernatural aspect of Slender Man, based on the idea of tulpas and thought forms. It's very, very interesting. If you're into that, go ahead and check it out. I'm all for cross-promoting, so I'm letting you know about that. And I will put a link to that in the show notes if you want to check it out. It's super, super cool. For this podcast is also my love too, and I didn't really want to cross over a lot of stuff here because this podcast is really about women's empowerment. Sometimes it's about, business, but it's really about psychic development, empowerment, women's issues, anything that empowers women, anything that gets you closer to your goals, mindset, new agey stuff, crystals, whatever, just stuff that's interesting. So most of my podcasts are with women, about women. So I'm going to start off this series with a really cool podcast that kind of has a crossover with The Fringe, but is kind of important because it deals with women's issues. And so it's interesting. I did this podcast with Maria Isoldde and Nathara, or Charlene Slimp, and we're going to be talking about exorcisms and how they relate to women's issues and misogyny and classism. I know, right? Nobody ever thinks about, when people always think about exorcisms, they always think about, the Exorcist, or the kind of over-the-topness of it, the sensationalism of it. But a lot of exorcisms, or the idea of exorcisms, or being possessed, it actually has to do with classism. So I don't want to give away all the juicy details in this intro, but I do want you to think about that, and we're going to kind of put a new spin on it, and it's a very, very interesting topic. Okay, so I want everybody to say their name, and then who they are, and what they do, and their website.
My name is Maria Isoldde. My website is called Maria Isoldde, and I am a tarot card reader. I'm also a witch, and I also like things that go bump in the night, so I'm a little bit of everything.
That's awesome. Charlene?
I'm Nathara, or Charlene, and my website is CrowSongLodge.com, and I am also a professional tarot reader, psychic, teacher, and witch. So I kind of do all of the things.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And I'll go ahead and put all of your information in the show notes, so that way people can go and click on your links and see what you guys are about. You're ladies. You're not guys, you're ladies. You ladies are about. So today we're going to be talking about exorcisms and how exorcisms can be used to prey upon social class. Mm-hmm. Which is just kind of an interesting topic. Nobody really talks about this aspect of, I want to say it's spiritualism, but it might be. I don't know. I don't know if exorcism falls under spiritualism. Would that be something completely different?
I would call it spirituality, since spiritualism is usually ascribed to a certain set of beliefs.
Yeah, okay, so spirituality, more apropos.
Not to, fuss over semantics or anything like that.
I like the semantics because I don't want a bunch of spiritualists emailing me and telling me that my podcast is horrible because they don't know the difference.
Yeah, that's the folks like Lilydale and stuff.
Right.
They're spiritualists.
Right. So I posted this article. This is why we got into this conversation in the first place. And I'll go ahead and post the article in the show notes too, so that way you can read it for yourself. But basically there was this pig farmer this is in Australia, and his wife was acting funny. And so this guy came in from this church he was a fundamentalist Christian, it says in the article, and he basically said because she was acting funny that she was possessed.
Yeah.
But I think this guy was a little crazy to begin with, because it says one of the things that he tried to do to rid her of these demons is locking her in the basement.
In the article, it says that he says that she was acting like a prostitute and would turn into a pig and a dog. Physically turn into a pig and a dog. Like, not like think she was a pig or a dog, but like physically take the shape.
That's very much like, I'm hallucinating. Have a nice day.
My guess is that he was crazy pants and she was not.
There's a little bit of some sexism happening here, some misogyny happening here, big time.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess one of his neighbors was a over-the-phone coach, it says, and a spiritual leader. They did some praying over her, and they tied her to some chairs, denied her food and water, slapped her a bunch too.
Yeah, they crushed her. They were trying to like squeeze the devil out like toothpaste.
Which is so bizarre. Like, who does it? I mean, I don't know. I mean, as much as I don't like the Catholic Church, they do have some decorum when it comes to exorcisms. I mean, there is a protocol.
Yeah, there are certain policies and procedures for sure.
Right. So I don't know who this person is, but they were doing all kinds of crazy stuff. It just sounded like basically, what do they call them? Sadists, misogynists? I don't know.
Yeah, and then like they called a local Baptist minister for guidance after she died. Maybe we should call a doctor. And the doctor was like, she's dead. We should call the police.
like, hello, what's going on here? This exorcist coach had them believing that she was going to rise from the dead because she needed to be exorcised, so she was going to die and then come back as her full self or something. I don't know the thought process behind this, but spoiler alert, she didn't rise from the dead.
I love a good comeback story too.
I know, right? She didn't rise from the dead, and her husband was like really sad about it because he really truly believed that she was going
to come back from the dead.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Accordingly, she was supposed to rise again 4 days later at her funeral, and they actually had the media, like newspapers and stuff, there to witness her resurrection at her funeral. So awkward.
And the police were called, and they got very minor sentences. We're talking manslaughter, 3 months. One guy got, and the husband got a suspended sentence for false imprisonment, and that's it.
Yeah.
There was like nothing.
Yeah, that's nothing.
That's
and
crazy.
Then the guy got remarried.
Yeah. False imprisonment and reckless injury. A suspended sentence and served no jail time.
For basically tying his wife up and killing her and listening to this dude who had no idea what he was doing.
Yeah. And the harshest sentence was 4 months.
Right. So we're talking a slap on the hand, basically. And they all went on with their little lives and thought nothing of killing this woman for being a whore, essentially. But she probably wasn't a whore. That's the thing.
It was the whole, like, acting like a prostitute. And I don't even know what that means exactly. Like, was she just chewing gum on street corners, or...
Yeah.
Like I said, like, she was dancing around outside, arms flailing about her head, swearing loudly, acting like a prostitute, and then physically taking on the form of a pig and a dog, as well as the personality of a sheep shearer.
And I know that there's, like, some religious groups, and I've heard of it, that they'll accuse the man will accuse the wife of something like that, so then he can get out of the marriage. So then he can get somebody like younger or something like that. That doesn't sound so far from other things that I've heard in like cults and stuff like that.
Maybe she just took off her bra or something. I don't know. Like what constitutes being a whore? Maybe she put on a bra. Yeah.
I'm not sure what like acting like a prostitute even means. Like,
yeah,
that's very subjective.
Yeah, that is. It's very very fundamentalist. It's very like, well, we decided that's what it is, therefore that's what it is.
I mean, so maybe she like, I don't know, showed her ankles.
I know, right?
I mean, or expressed her opinion.
In this conversation we had, we were talking about how would this have happened if he was not a farmer?
In other words, just like isolated, uneducated. Not saying that farmers are, but I'm saying like at what he was, or at the maybe where he was, he didn't have like that kind of access to certain things and certain people, and all he had was like just something that was very backwards and old, like mentality.
Yeah, exactly. That was the point of our conversation, was he preyed upon because of his social class, because he was this was in a very rural area. It was a very small city. If I even dare to call it a city, it was more like a community.
Yeah. Yeah, it was very tiny, like so small that the church had even closed.
And so we have this guy that thinks he's an exorcist who comes in and just does these things. And because they were all fundamentalists and all because they all went to the same church or they all had the same beliefs, then you automatically believe this person who is a charlatan.
And it's also just like just being desperate. Like some people just need that sense of escape. And sometimes that, people take advantage of that, or answers to something that they can't answer because their education level is not there. They weren't educated properly.
I don't foresee this happening especially the exorcism part. I do not foresee this happening if this man, well, first of all, he would be calling her a whore if he was more cultured. But also, I don't think he would have given in to this premise that she was basically needed an exorcism or basically possessed, I guess. I don't know. I think that's the part that confuses me about this whole story.
Yeah. And I've read follow-up articles on the case. Like specifically like on academia.edu about the trend of using exorcisms to punish misbehaving wives. They talk about in detail how the trial went down, and it was pretty much a terrible court case where they actually had someone in the witness stand who claimed to be channeling the word of God in the moment as a witness.
Wait, what? As a witness?
As a witness.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh, God.
And as testimony. So, like, God was there.
So, and the crazy thing about this, we're not talking about the 50s or 60s here. This happened in 1993. That's the thing that surprised me about it, was that this didn't happen like, we hear about these cases in the 70s and the 60s, you hear about the Enfield haunting, or she was supposedly possessed, or these things, and they happened in the 70s, and, paranormal stuff was just back into popular culture because of transcendental mediumship stuff and because of
Shirley MacLaine.
Shirley MacLaine, yeah. So there was just a lot of stuff about her, and transcendental mediumship was really popular, and so this stuff came back into the mainstream, and so people were playing with it. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about 1993. It's during the whole satanic panic thing that was happening, but not in Australia. This was happening more in the United States.
Yeah, and so it's kind of wild because like before. Like the story from the Catholic Church is that like all exorcisms had been stopped. But after reading up like in preparation for this conversation, I've discovered that it hasn't stopped at all. And I was reading another study on sagepub.com, another academic article that examines the case files from one of the Catholic priest exorcists who took like ridiculously good notes, and somebody sliced and diced the data to look at it. Like just scrolling up to the article, the data went through 2014. Yeah, so when he decided he was really, really old and wanted to retire.
Yeah, that's a lot of data right there. He had never stopped basically.
Yeah, so and he had done exorcisms for 10 years.
I don't know why I've read all about exorcisms, but I have. Most exorcisms happen to farmers, agriculture people living in rural areas. Even the exorcism of Emily Rose, she was like the first person in her family to go to college. They lived in a farmhouse. But it seems to happen to women mostly. There are men, but there are very few men. They usually have some sort of... With children. The children are usually the ones that get possessed, or they get possessed, and it's usually they're acting funny, or they're withdrawn, or they're having some sort of mental issue.
Yeah. Well, and those are the cases that you hear about, the ones that get really famous, or the ones that are super creepy, or that people make in the movies and stuff. And, like, looking at this Exorcist personal data from 2009 to 2014, he was presented 1,075 cases. He only performed 55 exorcisms. A lot of the other ones were solved with, 145 had non-religious solutions, like psychiatric services or medical services.
Okay.
All the rest of them had either confessions or blessings or religious study, prayers, or rituals of liberation. But 55 required exorcism.
And were most of those women?
Most of those were, 5 of them were from the upper or higher, the upper or upper middle class
5
social classes,
Okay.
like economic classes, and the rest were all, so the other 50 were all working class and lower. And only one of them was a male.
One.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm seeing a trend here.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's interesting to me.
Yeah, a very solid trend. So we're looking at, like, working class and lower women.
Now, were they all younger women, or what were the age? Was there any age discrepancies by any chance?
Yes, they were, 2 patients were under the age of 20, so not a lot of children.
Okay.
But 56% was the largest age category, and that was between 40 and 49 years old.
40 to 49. That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah. And then like 10% in all the other age categories. 60 and older was a whole category. So.
And were they married?
28% had sexual disorders. There's a lot of data here. It does not talk about marital status
Okay.
as far as data goes. It does talk about how almost everyone was brought by a family member or a spouse. It was 74.6%.
They were brought on by another family member?
They were brought to the Exorcist by a family member or their spouse.
Family member or spouse. Okay, so somebody's like, hey, they're doing something funny.
There are some really, really wild numbers.
Do you think, though, that demons would only possess, if there is such a thing, we're going ifs here. This is a very theoretical question, but do you think that demons would only possess the lower middle class? I mean, really? I mean, there's something off about this data to me as far as, like, that just seems silly to me. Or it seems improbable to me.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, it's pretty wild. And there's also, like, other really interesting information. Like, before turning to The Exorcist, 51% have participated in seances, rituals, black masses, peasant magic, blood pacts, rites with invocations to Satan and satanic music, or have turned to magicians, fortune tellers, gurus, holy men, dowsers, pranotherapists, and sex.
And sex.
Like, half of those people have done something that was not, and that's SECTS.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Wait,
Yeah.
what?
So not, like, religious sects, not sexual acts.
Okay.
The spelling on that one is very important.
So there are women who have delved in witchcraft or paganism or just New Age stuff.
Yeah, New Age stuff.
It's like a modern day witch hunt, right?
Yeah.
40% of cases, the exorcist and patient identify in the family tree the presence of a person, usually a woman, renowned as a witch, medium, Satanist, or sorceress who had launched an evil eye or participated in voodoo or Wicca rituals.
Huh.
That's how I feel about, like, my family. Like, when I came out as a witch, considering that my mom is a born-again Christian, Pentecostal Christian, she was like, she wanted to save my soul, and I was very afraid that she was going to start, like, getting people from her church to come to the house and like do an exorcism or something in that nature, because they were so, and I've gone to the church. It's like, it's very It's very powerful. It's very like, holy crap. You're like, oh, I'm not a pagan. No, don't look at me. Don't look at me. No. Like I could see how, not even like what that woman went through, but just being, put in a corner and being preyed upon, and just in that sense, I could see the sense of like, of feeling trapped and feeling a little crazy. So I think that by having the Exorcist, the person would probably act a little bit more out of character because they would feel like, without any power, if they weren't like possessed or if it wasn't mental issues or something in that nature.
Yeah, and the crazy thing is, like, during the trial too, they were saying stuff like sometimes, the woman, her name was Joan, would like come back, and they would see her come back and like, to the present, when she would say, like, stop it, you're hurting me, and they would say, no, we're not hurting you, we're hurting the demon, you're going to be okay. And then one of their justifications for your proof that she was obviously possessed was that she was a fragile woman, and there's no way she would have survived that long if she hadn't been possessed.
There's so much misogyny in that whole sentence, I don't even know where to start.
Mm-hmm.
That's like right up there with like toss the witch in the pond. If she survives, she's a witch. If she dies, she was pure. Like
there's no win here.
Right? Like, oh, okay, well, that's nice.
Yeah, I don't understand this whole idea about women being the weaker sex when we go through childbirth, for Christ's sake. Yeah, try to have a baby and then tell me about how being weak.
Mm-hmm.
So back to your data, let's talk about that a little bit. Because did it say anything when you were reading about these articles? Did it say anything about what the difference was between those who got psychiatric help and those who were actually exorcised? Like what the difference was in his discernment?
Like how he made that determination? And
yeah,
stuff?
yeah.
The data doesn't say, or at least the article doesn't. But they said that like on the first, it would take at least 3 interviews before he would decide to do an exorcism.
3, okay.
With the person. It's nice, I guess, that he was referring people to psychiatric and medical professionals more often than not. One person had 354 exorcisms performed on them in 1 year.
364? That's like every day.
Wow.
Except, I guess, Easter or Christmas, maybe? I don't know what day you take off.
Wow.
Yeah, so that is pretty wild. What I thought was especially interesting, though, is the article that I'm reading says that it talks about who believes in an objective evil, an external objective evil force, and who doesn't, according to Gallup polls. The belief in the devil as an actual being has increased from 55% of the U.S. population in 1990 to 70% in 2004.
Yeah, I blame that on that show, Paranormal State.
That is one of the theories for why people believe in it. Yeah, and they say that the increase in horror movies and paranormal horror shows, reality or otherwise based, have there's been a corresponding increase over the years.
Yeah, that show, I remember when that show came on, I used to watch it, and then all of a sudden the head guy said that he was being followed by a demon, and I'm like, oh, fuck. And then all the cases from that point forward that I was asked to investigate all had a demon theme to it. And I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? Really? Y'all watched that show. And I knew that was going to happen. What's the other show? What's the other one? That movie that came out, the found footage one. Paranormal something.
Activity?
That one. Yeah, Paranormal Activity came out.
Paranormal Activity?
Around the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, same, general plotline as the Supernatural TV show.
That became popular because then all of a sudden everything is demon-oriented up after that. So I can understand why people believe in it. I don't see a lot of people getting possessed by it unless you're a woman and you're lower middle class.
Yeah, exactly. And that corresponds with people's belief in the devil. The belief in the devil itself is associated with being of a lower socioeconomic class.
Yeah, I'm looking at this abstract that I found. I was looking up signs of being possessed, and I found this abstract from the Abnormal and Behavioral Psychology section.
Sounds like a college class.
School of Psychology, College Education, Behavioral Studies, Addis Ababa, and University of Ethiopia. But I don't know why, but it has a Australian phone number, so I don't know. Maybe they did something in tandem. They were talking about possessive behavior, what it represents. And it says an episodic disruption of behavior during which person's personality being replaced by human or animal spirit or by God, devil, deity, or by spirit of an inanimate object.
Yeah, that's a very broad, and it's interesting to see where it's from, too, because there's a distinction made in some studies, but not all, between exorcisms and possessions and addercisms. And see addercisms in African cultures where they're inviting spirits in to help them out.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, another word for it in that particular culture is called being mounted, because the god or the deity of the spirit actually mounts you. It's like they're riding you.
Oh, okay. That's very interesting. I never heard of that, actually.
Yes, and this is actually considered a positive experience.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of a negative experience. So they can help with healing, they can help teach you things, they can help counsel you in that position, they can deliver wisdom. It's actually supposed to be a very positive and helpful experience. And they actually have services in churches and other religious rituals where that's the idea. That's what they're aiming for.
So there can be there's a positive aspect of possession then.
Yeah.
Yes. But not usually in Christian religions. There's a few sects running around that are really into the speaking in tongues and stuff, which is a part of possession.
But you're only being possessed by the Spirit of God. That's the thing.
Oh, okay.
And I know because my mom, since she's in a Pentecostal, they do that a lot. They'll just go into convulsions, and I've had that happen while I was in the church. I had you basically from what I remember seeing is that you basically the preacher he puts his hand over your head and prays over you, but very intently, and you just feel this wave of emotion of mostly it's joy, and you start falling back, you literally start going into a trance while that's happening, and you fall back and you feel this wave of just happiness. It feels like if you're it's very euphoric. And I guess that's how that's the, and the thing is that I've been in Afro-Caribbean, Santero, tambores, and cajones, which are the parties that they have where people get possessed. And I've been in those as well. And I've never been possessed. I've never had one of their spirits mount me, but I've gotten close, and it's the same sort of sensation of feeling if you're that sense of ecstasy, and sort of you just want to be here, you don't want to go anywhere. But in the Christian one, it's the Spirit of God. It's Jesus who's touching you and giving you a message and telling you something or what have you. Other cultures, it's their gods, and for Christians, that's the devil, and he's lying to you. It's not really a god. It's the devil.
In the non-Christian religions, find it to be a very positive experience that contributes in a good way to their lives. They're happier for it. Whereas Christians who are possessed, not speaking in tongues, but possessed, have their lives destroyed by it without intervention.
Okay, so it's just how you feel about it. I mean, theoretically, if you were possessed by a demon and it made you a better person, then that wouldn't be anything, right?
Very confusing for everyone.
But it seems again, it goes back to socioeconomical and gender, really. I mean, it's more it feels to me, just based off of what we're talking about here and just what I've read, it just seems like it's so much about a modern day witch hunt. It's so much about, here are these women and they're not doing what they're told, or they have some sort of idiosyncrasies or some kind of mental troubles, and therefore they must be exorcised because they're not doing what they're told or what they're supposed to or what is expected of them in some way, shape, or form.
Well, I'm pretty sure that's how the witch hunt in back in the day, that's how it went. A woman spoke out of turn to her husband, oh, she's a witch. let's burn her at the stake, or like let's hang her. It's it's the same. I think it's the same kind of thing, just in a much smaller scale. From the sound of it.
My parents used to work at Camarillo State Hospital, and this is in Ventura County for those who are listening in other places. And there was a ward there up until it closed, and we're talking they closed in the 90s. There was a ward there for women who were either, air quotes, alcoholics, or their husbands brought them in for talking back or having too many opinions. And women were put into these places, and then they got electrocuted. What's that treatment called?
Electroshock therapy.
Oh, the electroconvulsive therapy?
Yes. Until they got whatever demon, air quotes, out of them, or they stopped talking back.
Yeah,
I can believe that.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Yeah, that's clearly the devil right there.
Okay, so I found the actual specific general symptoms of possession based on this abstract. I'll put a link to all these things we're talking about in the show notes too, so everybody can look at it. But so here's the general symptoms, and I did. We have a group chat going on right now. Just so you know, listeners. So I did put it in the chat. So if you ladies want to look at it, but it says a few or more following symptoms may be witnessed in the possessed person, who may be mild, moderate, or severe. In other words, they may be sober or violent. Okay, so it doesn't matter. It can be mild symptoms or major. Loss of control over one's actions, behavior change, loss of personal identity, change in tone of voice, wandering attention, reality mixed with fantasy, loss of awareness of surroundings, loss of sense of time, belief that one's body changes in appearance, feeling of omnipotence or powerfulness, loss of memory, sometimes body hopping by the medium in a violent way. Like, this is me every day.
Right? I'm just like, I'm lucky if I know what day it is. So there goes my time stamp.
I'm a Pisces, for freaking sake. That's like, I think isn't that like part of Pisces? Yeah, like.
Of Pisces.
Yeah. Like, this is me every day. I don't know. Like, that is such a vague and confusing order of symptoms. I don't know. Anybody could be this at any time.
Well, if you aren't, like, following the rank and file, right?
Pretty much.
Pretty wild. It's pretty much whenever, like, your person that you're focused on isn't doing what you expect them to do or want them to do, or otherwise think they should be doing.
What I'm getting from this data is that essentially the idea of a negative possession is a Christian construct. A lot of the things that I'm seeing in possession feel very puritanical. It feels very pilgrim. It feels very like...
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. People who live in, like, places that can't get modern day education or media or anything in that nature. Or you feel very isolated. It's like it has that isolating type of sensation for the people that are, like, doing this and or believe in this, to the point where, like, this guy basically ended up killing his wife because he actually believed in this
and getting away with it. That's the thing, getting away with it.
Yeah, and I guess like a doctor testified that it was possible that the final heart attack was actually convulsions caused by the evil spirits leaving her body, based on a documentary he saw and the movie The Exorcist.
I have no words at this moment.
I can't believe that was like testimony in a court case.
This frustrates me so much because do you know about the West Memphis 3 case, right?
Yes, that case was a cluster and a half.
Yeah, it happened around the same time, the whole satanic panic thing, but essentially, for those who don't know, these 3 kids, one who was he was Wiccan, apparently, but he was a practicing Wiccan, and the other one was mentally challenged, and the other one was just a best friend who was into Metallica. They basically went to jail for 20 years for these 3 kids that got murdered because they wore black t-shirts and because the one guy was into witchcraft. When they were in trial, this one guy who was the leading person in witchcraft he was a cop who got a certificate online about Satanism, and he was their star witness, and he basically took a correspondence course that took him like a week to do, and then he decided based on that correspondence course that Damien Eccles, who was the one that was into the witchcraft, that he was a Satanist.
That's nice, and it's important. It's important to realize that all three of those young kids have been exonerated based on DNA evidence.
Yes, they weren't even there. They weren't even near the location of the crime, but because the one kid was into Metallica and wore black T-shirts all the time, and the other kid was a Wiccan, they went to jail for 20 years. Yeah, but the star witness was this guy who was like, yes, pentagrams are bad and evil, and the Sabbats are evil. And I mean, I will find his testimony and put it in the show notes because it's freaking amazing to watch. I was just like, what? Are you kidding me? People are taking this seriously. And they did. They actually did interviews with the jury people, and they said that his testimony was very compelling because they didn't know anything about witchcraft, and so if he had taken a course online, then he must know about it.
Wow.
Yeah. But this is the kind of stuff that gets through in court systems because nobody really knows about witchcraft. People don't know about paganism. People see it as a taboo, I guess.
Mhm. Oh no, in Miami, Florida, and I'm pretty sure in maybe New York or something like that. But there's such a large community of santeros that the cops actually have courses that the county actually gives them, and the person who teaches it is actually a santero, and some of the cops are santeros themselves. And the reason they do that is because sometimes you'll go inside a house and there might be a crime, but it's a house of a santero, so you gotta they're like, let's not mess with it. So when they say, it's when there's a crime related to that, they are educated on it. They don't use the whole thing that they're santeros as an excuse, or they didn't get it online for $50 and they took a little course and they got a little tiny certificate. It's really ingrained into the community. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure New York does something similar too. They have to. Because they have a large community as well.
That is really exciting to hear, actually.
It is. That's really amazing. I'm glad that they're so progressive. It's refreshing because, I mean, this happened in Arkansas, of all places, but super Christian, super fundamentalist, super Presbyterian, Bible Belt. Think there's a black and white, heaven, hell, the end, done. Demon, God. I don't know.
In between, no nothing.
No, nothing. No. And so these things where any one of us could be possessed based on just our belief systems alone, which is a little scary when you think about it.
It really is. It's the reinstitution of official exorcisms by the Catholic Church is kind of disturbing to me.
It is disturbing in that there are enough cases that they are needed. And if all that data is true, and it's really, most of them are women and they're in the lower middle class or even lower than that, or, poverty level, that's very disconcerting.
It is.
What do we do about it? I mean, what is some way that we can combat this? I mean, it doesn't just happen in the United States either. I mean, I was watching a TV show and they were talking to some people in Romania, again, rural area, not near cities, old country, where they stabbed some people because they thought they were vampires. And then they went and they dug up the person's grave and staked them again just to make sure.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and this is they were talking to the police in the area and they said this is a common occurrence. We see this every 3 to 6 months. Somebody is considered a vampire, and we have these murderers out here because people truly believe it.
Where is that?
Romania. Yeah.
Romania? Okay, yeah.
It's the same kind of hysteria, though. I mean, I guess I'm going to call it hysteria, but it's that idea that if you're different or if there's something wrong with you, I mean, even if it's it could be as simple as just going through menopause. When you act differently and you change. You change your behavior, everything.
And I'm pretty sure, because as I think Charlene was saying, that most of the women that did get exercised were in that stage in their life that they were probably going to go through or were going through menopause. And I'm pretty sure that for years upon millennia, that's been the case. I mean, millennia is a big number, but but you get what I'm saying. You get what I'm saying.
We've got a couple of them now, yeah.
So, I mean, how do you combat something like this, though? Because it's really, I mean, I would say if it's across the board and it's, a lot of males, a lot of females, if it was, if the numbers were a little more balanced, I would say, okay, it's something. I don't believe in demons. I believe in jinn. I believe in malevolent forces of some sort, and not necessarily demons. And so I mean, I'm sure there's that 1% somewhere in there that yes, somebody's being possessed, or there is some kind of like actual thing happening. There's some authenticity to it, but for the most part, it just seems like if you don't have schizophrenia, or if you don't have a very obvious mental condition, if you're in that gray area where they're not really sure what's going on with you, then automatically you are considered an exorcist. You're possessed. You need an exorcism.
People who go to church more often believe in the devil more, and people who, experience more hardship. Nobody mentions, educational level as a demographic, so it's hard to see, is it an education issue, or is it who experiences more hardship?
Because it's even in third world countries and in economical, what's the word that you were saying? Economical.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And anyways,
totally.
That's where you have a lot of child brides and and all that jazz, and it's because women are seen as a property. They're seen as objects. They're seen as a means to an end of finances. They're like cattle for some of these people, for some of these cultures. That and even in the United States, that's still the case. Some cultures still do that here. And I'm not talking about just non-Christians. I'm talking about Christians too. And I think it's the same thing with the whole. And I believe that with those misogynistic views of women, they use the exorcism as an excuse, as hey, you're possessed, so I'm going to do stuff so I can get stuff out of you eventually, or put you back in line so you can get what I need you to get, or use you the way that I need to use you. And that's okay, because everybody around us believes the same thing that I do. And I think that's how it works.
Yeah, and it's very interesting that physical punishment is the way to get rid of the devil.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it might just be me, but I would be if I were the objective evil force in the world, if I could get people to physically abuse each other more, that would be cool. So exorcisms would play right into my plan.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I just wonder about, you were talking about, and I was thinking about it, you were talking about how if you go to church more, then you're going to believe in this hierarchy of, God and the devil and angels and demons and stuff, and how a lot, I lived in Arkansas for a while. People that went to church, a lot of them were just middle class. They were people who worked in the factories, who were just trying to get by, and they were just trying to live good lives. You know what I mean? The higher classes, they had their own church, and they didn't go as much, I noticed. Or it was more for, to set up golf stuff.
Appearances.
Yeah, it was for appearances. So it just wasn't the same. The people who really went to church, Wednesdays and Sundays were the middle class. And a lot of ways I feel, and I don't want to get, too controversial, but I feel it's sort of a to control the masses kind of thing. Where if you are stuck in this idea that there's heaven and hell and that there's good and bad, then you can be controlled more, and you can be told whatever needs to be told in order for you to stay in line, kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
And I would just wonder if exorcism is, in a way, is part of that control.
I absolutely think that it is. And the whole idea that you would need an intermediary between yourself and your gods is kind of paternalistic, I guess.
It is. It is. Yeah. Why do you need somebody to tell you what to do on behalf of a god? That's so silly to me.
Right, and it's pretty solid against the New Testament teaching.
Oh, snap. Yeah, you're right about that, actually.
Yeah, so it's really interesting that in the West especially, we put a lot of stock into, like, not just in Christian faith, but also in other faiths, like, we need this intermediary.
Yeah. Yeah, we always do. We always need somebody we need even in New Age stuff too. We need a medium to talk to our dead. We need a Louis Hay to give us our affirmations. We need you know what I mean? It goes on and on. We need somebody to tell us how to empower ourselves.
The guru or the
guru
or the mentor or the whoever to tell you what's what, you know?
Exactly.
You don't even want to get me started on, like, certificates and elitism and all that stuff, but we've been over that before.
I follow that stuff too, so I'm not saying there's anything bad with it. I'm just saying it has to be put into context, or it can become your god.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why I was saying, like, it's that thing in Western culture, not just exclusive to Christians. Like, we want that teacher, mentor, intermediary person.
So I guess my question goes back to, like, what do we do about it? Like as a society, or just even individually, what do we do about this kind of stuff? Because I mean, this, in a way, this is another witch hunt. This is basically, it never stopped. It just seems like the idea that women are lesser than women who are into something other than Christianity, they are targets. I mean, that when you said that most of these women who had exorcisms had done something that would be considered New Age, I mean, that to me is surprising, but it's also scary.
Alarming?
Yeah, it's alarming.
It's definitely alarming. In reading this article, this paper that discusses the actual testimony with posts and stuff, they talk about this issue where the courts themselves kind of treat the Christian belief in possession as the default for society, even though society views exorcisms as being these bizarre, abnormal things. So it's got this weird dichotomy, and even the judges in their statements have said that, like, yeah, the devil's a real thing, and so we have to take that into account. And I think that's, like, a real issue when it comes to these things, and having our government and criminal institutions support exorcisms in this way by acknowledging that there's some reality to it is very harmful. Like, I'm all about the separation of church and state, and I think that's super important.
I do too, but both of you, I mean, I didn't even bother to ask you, do you believe in demons?
I don't necessarily believe in demons. I believe that human spirits can become evil, or, like, they can mutate and cause havoc. But I don't necessarily believe in, like, demons the way the Catholic Church believes in demons.
Yeah, like, I think that people can be jerks, and I'm, like, watching my language a lot.
You don't have to.
So extrapolate the way you like to on that.
Yeah.
Yep. And that applies to living folk and dead folk.
I would say do some research before you go straight into demons. Like, Paranormal State is fake, people. I just want you to know that. I mean, The Exorcist is fake. Do some research. Do some research about demons. Do some research about Catholicism. Do some research about the church. Try translations of the Bible. Don't read the King James Version. There's a whole thing about that. It's a whole other show. But, like, do some research.
And you don't need an intermediary. Like, you know, you can have that personal relationship with whatever God you follow.
And don't believe in ghost adventures. It's not really they're big about haunted. They're big about things being possessed or things being evil. Don't believe it. It's fake. It really is fake, I promise. Read a book. Really, quite honestly, read a book. Go on YouTube. If you don't like reading books, go on YouTube and start looking up stuff. There are some really great things on YouTube about theology and demons and God and all kinds of stuff. It's very interesting.
Yeah, and if you're experiencing something weird and you're really, really concerned about it, see your doctor.
Definitely see your doctor.
Or both, but definitely get your doctor in on that.
Or at least keep a healthy balance of, religion and science, and not just jump to conclusions. Do your research first. Go to the doctor.
Mm-hmm.
If that doesn't work, then, look at other avenues. That doesn't involve exorcism.
Yeah, all of them. All of them first.
Mm-hmm. All of them first.
I got nothing else, girl.
Thank you for listening to the We Witches 3 podcast. For show notes and links, just go to wewitches3.com. And don't forget to check our Patreon at patreon.com/wewitches3.